The ability to communicate effectively is one of the most important skills of any manager. All communication has two aspects: what you want to communicate, or the content, and how you communicate it, or the presentation. In this episode, we will discuss how to make your content as effective as possible. Hi, I'm Rick Kendall.
And I'm Fred Ball.
Welcome to Management Mastery. The purpose of these podcasts is to share what each of us has learned about good and bad management in our combined over 40 years of experience, both as managers and executive coaches. During that time, we've coached managers at every level in companies from Fortune 100s to brand new startups in all major businesses, including nonprofits, government, and education. So whether you're just starting in your first management position or are an experienced manager looking to strengthen your management skills, we know our podcast will be valuable to you. Regardless of the purpose or the method of your communication, there are two components: the content, or what you're communicating, and the presentation, or how you're communicating it. This is true whether you're communicating with one person or with 100. And it's true whether your communication is written or oral. We'll also discuss issues specific to virtual communication in a future episode. But in this episode, we want to focus on content. That is, how to make what you want to communicate as effective as possible. Now, first and foremost, you must have a clear understanding of why what you want to communicate is relevant to your audience. I mean, why do you want them to receive your content? And what actions or understandings do you want them to have or take as a result of your communication?
That is so important. And, you know, it's a fairly easy statement to make. Have a clear understanding of why what you want to communicate is relevant to your audience, but it's a lot harder when you're actually thinking about your audience and the various people and the various functions and so forth.
Yeah, and you really have to do that because you don't want people in your audience to go, why am I here? Why is he or she telling me this? I don't understand. So there's got to be a clear relevance to everyone you're talking to. And again, you can be talking to one person, and it's more likely they might look at you quizzically and say, why are you telling me this? But if you've got a group of people, there may be some that just don't understand. So it's important that what you're saying to your listeners or your readers, because it's both, this is true for both written and spoken communication, they have to know why you're telling them what you're telling them.
And then, as you said, the other part of this is, what do you want them to take away from the interaction? Exactly.
What am I supposed to do? You know, what do you want from me on this? That's really kind of it may be just, I want you to be aware of things. I want you to know why we're doing what we're doing, or it could be just informational, where you're not expected, you, the audience, isn't expected to do anything other than to be aware of something and to understand it. But again, as the communicator, you want to be sure that the recipient of your communication understands why they're receiving it. And that's not always done. And the next important thing is that your communication is audience focused. And what do we mean by that? We mean understand who that person is, what they already know, what they don't know, and how what you're saying is relevant to them. And I think, you know, we've all experienced, to me, the most outstanding example of this is some poorly constructed what they call user interfaces. We've all gone on a website, try to do something, and just have no idea how to do it because it's not set up in a way that we can understand it. Now, we don't think of websites as communication sometimes, but they are. They're trying to tell you, okay, if you want to do X, you have to do A, B, C. And if that's not clear, they're not communicating effectively. We all have that experience of where we kind of say technology is just incomprehensible. Another example that we can encounter all the time is where people use jargon, or what I've labeled TLAs, three-letter acronyms, where you're supposed to know what ABC means, and you don't, because nobody's ever told you. But the communicator just assumes you know.
That is so frustrating when that happens.
Oh yeah, and you feel stupid. You feel annoyed, and you feel that you're the person telling you this has no sensitivity to who they're talking to. So yeah, it's just really bad content, and it gets in the way of effective communication. So again, it comes back to understand who you're communicating with and what their level of understanding is. Now, you can also overcompensate the other way and over-explain things, but that's probably a better sin than under-explaining.
One of the things that you said before is that sometimes it can just be information. For example, if you were meeting with a group of people and talking with them, you knew you had been to a manager meeting where you had heard about the direction of the organization, and you wanted to communicate this to the people on your staff. And one of the things that you have to remember there is that their initial reaction may be, I don't need to know this, but you've got to make sure as the communicator that you help them to understand that the direction of the organization is important, because it will change decision making along the line.
Yes. I mean, again, it comes back to why is this relevant? And you need to explain that. I mean, sometimes we've all had the experience where a superior in an organization will just tell us something without putting it into any context that makes it relevant for us when it potentially is. So it could be just so we understand why the organization is doing what it's doing. I mean, it doesn't mean we're supposed to do anything differently necessarily, but just understand. And that's a big part of communication.
So as the manager, what do you need to be asking yourself?
Well, I think you got to be saying what do my people know? What do they need to know to help them do their jobs better, or at least understand why they're doing what they're doing? And we all want to be relevant. We talk about this a little bit later, but we all want to know where what we do fits into the larger picture, whether it's the company or an organization we belong to or whatever. We want to know what our place is in terms of whatever it is being discussed. And that's understanding your audience from the perspective of making what you're telling them relevant to them is so important. And I think also if somebody's telling you something and you don't see why it's relevant to you, this is where things go in one ear and out the other. So it's important, if you want people to remember it, you got to relate it to them. And this is also why it's important to, try to have humor or stories or some emotional content, because those are all elements that will help people integrate what they're being told and understand why it's relevant to them.
Yeah. One of the things that you want to look at also, and you're talking about this somewhat, is what makes the person resistant to the communication. Are there possible misconceptions or differing the differing points of view on the situation? If so, what are they, and does the communication address them up front?
Oh, I agree, and this comes back to understanding your audience in regard to what you're communicating to them. Like you just said, what are their preconceptions? What are their biases? What are their what kind of frame of mind do they bring to this conversation? You want to understand that and address it in terms of how you present what you're presenting, what you're communicating to your audience. Because if you don't, then there may be barriers that you just aren't aware of, and your communication is not going to be effective.
Yep. Then the other thing that we talked about earlier was the communication experience is such that you want the audience to be motivated to do something, like taking action or changing their behaviors. And there are some things that you want to keep in mind for that. You want to present a picture typically of the future with a vision that helps clarify the direction. And we say vision, but it doesn't have to be grandiose, but you're taking an idea and you're helped to clarify the direction in which the organization needs to move. If the direction involves change, then you need to have clear reasons for the change, and you need to be patient to be able to explain the change to people and then give good time for explanation and discussion.
Absolutely. We talked about this a bit in a previous episode on influence, but it's so important that what you're communicating is, as we said, is relevant to the person hearing it, so they understand why, if there's a change involved or they're being asked to do something different or new, they understand why they're being asked to do it. It just makes everybody more receptive to the message, and particularly when the communication is one-on-one or very small groups, you want to offer the opportunity, in fact, encourage the opportunity for people to ask questions, to get clarification, to present other scenarios, to voice resistance. All of that is critical to effective communication. I think I've talked about this in a previous episode, working with a guy who just could not abide anyone asking him any question when he said to do something. And even when you were asking for clarification or better understanding, he took it as a challenge. And you can't be that way. You have to encourage people to ask questions, to present alternatives, so that you know that your message is not only received but understood and agreed to.
Yeah. Then you want to keep your message as simple as possible. If you can focus on a single point you want them to move on, that would be great. If there's more than one idea, what you want to do is connect the idea so that they can be seen as a single objective with multiple parts. That helps the person to understand that you're not coming in with 10 things that you're asking them to do. You're coming in with one, and people will go away and have a greater chance to remember that.
Yeah, it helps people to understand, how everything fits together, and if if there's a logical connection to everything, then it's just easier to comprehend and respond to. But if they're presented as independent things not connected, then you've got 5 things to remember instead of 1.
Yeah. Then, as Rick said before, if you can add emotion to the content through stories, analogies, humor, or personal vulnerability, then it's going to make it much more interesting for people. And you want to keep in mind that people want work that makes a difference in their own situation. It's not just the work that the organization does, but it's the work that they do in their particular job and their particular function.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, people, we've all asked ourselves, we've all been given orders or told to do something and walk away and we go, why do I have to do that? What's that relevant to anything? How's that moving the ball down the field? And it's important that people feel that, again, it doesn't have to be grandiose, but what they're doing is meaningful and is contributing to the success of the operation, that it's not just a waste of time. And you've got to make that clear to people when you communicate that you want them to do something. In this episode, we have talked about the content part of communication and how important it is to understand the audience for your communication and how the content relates to their needs and how the content is relevant to what they do and what they're doing and why it's important to them. We hope you have found this podcast useful and will come back again for more management mastery. If you have any comments about this or any of our episodes, or would like to find out more about our other services, including one-on-one coaching and group seminars for managers, visit our website at careercoachclass.com. Thanks for listening.